She extended a hand towards him. "Thank you."
"No worries."
He'd hesitated and then returned the universal gesture of gratitude.
"We're doing everything we can to find your brother."
"I know." Her voice had lowered and her fine-boned fingers had curled around his, as though they belonged there. Lips parted, she'd stared at him for a solemn second that stretched into two, and then, hand trembling, she'd slipped her fingers free. "Thanks again." Ewan's blood had pounded long after she'd returned inside the hall. Even the compass pointing north on the map before him hadn't been able to center him. A fleeting smile in a woman's eyes had never affected him so much. He stopped patting Whiskey, and the Kelpie lifted a large paw to bat his forearm in protest. Ewan shook his head.
"We gotta go, Whisk. The farm jobs won't have done themselves while we've been away."
He reached for the rolled-up canvas swag at his feet. There was no need to find Kree and tell her Seth was safe. Travis would have texted the command post later, and she would have received the news straight away. There was also no need to intrude on her relief to say goodbye. It wasn't his place to share in her joy or to expect any thanks. It was enough he'd helped save a life. He should go home to Morellon. He'd had a liquid breakfast of 2 hot coffee, and his gear was already packed, ready for another morning shift spotting in Travis's Cessna light plane. He tossed last night's bed plus the adjacent duffel bag onto the ute's tray. Behind him, the good news spread faster than a wind-fueled bushfire. He could hear backs being slapped, jokes cracked, and long-forgotten laughter beginning to dissolve the strain that had hovered like an ominous cloud. He had to get out of there before he'd be expected to join in the jubilation. He'd check he'd packed his phone charger and make tracks. Whiskey's ears twitched and his tail thumped the ute tray back with such force, Ewan was sure the shock absorbers cursed. His fingers stilled on the duffel bag zipper. There was only one other person at the command post who could cause Whiskey to act like a hyperactive pup. Kree Garrett. Ewan slowly turned, and with each degree of rotation his self-control slid more firmly into place. He'd already let fatigue and emotion weaken him. He'd lowered his guard and allowed her in. There couldn't be any more cracks in his armor. There couldn't be any more revisiting the memory of how perfectly she'd fitted against him when he'd briefly held her close to comfort her when a sighting of Seth had proved a false alarm. And there couldn't be any more yearning for the things he couldn't ever have. Black and tan flashed in his peripheral vision as Whiskey leaped from the ute to the ground. Ewan took off his akubra and raked a hand through the snarls in his hair. Just great. Whiskey's adoration for the soft-talking American would make a hasty retreat impossible. Ewan held the hat in front of his face to mask his expression before settling it back on his head and pulling the brim low. Kree had been on Australian soil for under 2 days, but his self-preservation had already earmarked her perceptiveness as trouble. The way she searched his face for what he wasn't telling her was as dangerous as a cornered western brown snake. Kree bent to scratch Whiskey's stomach as he collapsed in a besotted heap in the red dirt at her feet. His back leg shook as she tickled his favourite spot. She laughed, a musical and sweet sound, light with relief. Ewan folded his arms and gazed past the girl and dog towards the wide, tree-lined gravel road that would take him home. It didn't matter that he'd finally heard Kree laugh, or that the sound had warmed the edges of the chill that refused to leave his heart. She'd soon fly home to the States. Kree straightened, but continued to rub Whiskey's belly with the toe of her laced hiking boot. She grinned at the dog. "So much for being Mr. Tough Guy, Whiskey. You're nothing but a big baby." Ewan's hands clenched beneath his crossed arms.